Hello everyone, my name is AJ and welcome to my studio. And today we are going to be continuing our tutorials, our how to draw series, by learning to draw the male body. We're going to be following many similar principles, including proportions and basic guidelines of construction. So without further ado, let's get started. As you can see, I have already divided the page into 7 equal sections and drawn in the head and the center line. And I know that you can see it on there. It's this little bitty line right here. That's going to be right where the groin of our character is going to lie. And yeah, let's just get right into it. Got myself a pencil and a brick eraser for larger mistakes if necessary. So, one thing I stated in the how to draw the female tutorial is that the head for women are the shoulders rather are about 2 heads broad. For men, usually in many different styles, is 3. So, using just general approximation and assumption, let's just draw that across here. Pretty close. And next, bring it down. We're going to bring it down to a little past the halfway point, and bring it up and around. Now, because of his broader shoulders, we're going to be drawing the rib cage a little more broad as well. And men, of course, usually at least, have larger shoulders, so we're going to quickly add that. There are some styles I've seen where the shoulders have been as big as or larger than the head. 1 second. There we go. I need something to protect my hand here. Protect the paper from my hand, rather. One of the two. And then the third major mass of the body, the pelvis. Now, unlike the female, whose pelvis is almost as wide as her shoulders is, the male's, his pelvis isn't going to exceed the width of his rib cage to really help drive home that very iconic, strong, heroic build, which bears a resemblance to a triangle, where you have his head right here, his shoulders right here, and then his pelvis is somewhere around here. Can that be seen on the camera? Yeah, it's faint, but you can see it. So this is essentially the aesthetic we're going for, and good thing I grabbed the big eraser. Alright, now that we got the major masses out of the way, let's do as we did before and establish the legs. So the proportions are going to be fairly similar to the female, just quickly tossing in the leg line here, and the knee ends at just the bottom of the head, the 5th head. Hang on a second, just getting something set up here, I forgot. Anatomy is something I still am rather iffy with if I'm trying to follow exact guidelines, so having a bit of a reference for myself is convenient. And it's not bad to use references. Anyone who tells you that using reference is bad obviously doesn't know what they're doing. They probably do abstract and modern art. And let's do the other leg real quick, just throw in the femur and the knee joint. Next, let's create the lower leg. And the ankle is maybe about right there. And the foot, we're not going to get into too many specifics for it. So we're going to make it about like this. Generally, men are bigger in many, many respects than women. So the feet are going to be much, much larger. And I'll get into some minor specifics at the end of the video, kind of as guidelines and pointers for when you're wanting to draw a man and a woman next to each other. Alright. Now let's do the arms. So, like last time, because this is where his navel will be, approximately. So that's where his elbow is going to land. Yep. Maybe make the elbow circle a little larger. And then the lower arm leading down to the wrist. And then the hand, which is going to be nothing more than just this teardrop shape with a line cutting through it to establish where the fingers would be. Because, as I said, we're not getting into any specifics. This is just a general idea, and we'll break the body into pieces to learn in their own more detailed way. Alright, so that's the basis, the pure basics of it down. So now let's move on to the fleshing it out. As I said when we were drawing the head in its glory, the neck is about as wide as the outside of the jaw. This varies depending on your build, of course. If you are skinnier, it won't be that way. If you're bigger, then it might be wider. But as with the female, the shoulders go in kind of this almost clothes hanger fashion from the arm. And now this is something that's more of a stylistic choice. Men generally are more angular, and this not necessarily to kind of, I don't know, stereotype or whatever, but it demonstrates power. Because something that's hard and angular seems powerful. Which is why you take a look at a truck, for instance, like a big old semi, and it's generally very blocky, very angular. And obviously semi-trucks are rather powerful. But then you take a look at like a sports car, a Maserati or whatever, and those things are very sleek, rounded curves. And it doesn't seem as powerful, as strong. And the same aesthetic can apply to the male figure when you're drawing it. So if you want to make a male character look powerful, use slightly more angular lines, like what I did on his deltoid here, is I just drew some soft angles, because there's a difference between hard angles and soft angles. It's generally how wide they are, because like this could be a hard angle, but if it's several angles to cover the same distance that are very wide, it looks softer. Because the human body isn't a lot of, if any, angles at all. It's mostly round curves. Anyway, I'm rambling at this point. And then we'll just draw in his bicep area here. Now, if you wanted to, you could also add a lot of definition right here, but this guy isn't a muscle head or whatever. And now let's do the outer curve of the lower arm that tapers into the hand, the wrist, and the inner curve. We're not doing too much muscle here, it's just very, very light. Alright. And as we did with the female, let's just quickly throw in this cutout here to indicate the underside of the rib cage. And we'll remember these points right here. We'll be using those in a little bit. And I'll just quickly flesh out the other arm as well. Generally I don't do it this way, but hey. Whatever. Shake things up a little bit. And flesh this out. It's kind of like a teardrop shape. And then it goes up into the shoulder. Now generally that would actually be more hidden by the torso, but we're not going for perfection here, we're just going for overall proportions and where things line up. Now, as with the female, the bottom of the second head is going to be the bottom of something else, but instead of breast, it's going to be the bottom of his pectoral muscles. So we'll do this lightly angled little shape that leads up into his shoulder. Symmetry, not an easy thing to get. But you know what? Humans aren't naturally symmetrical. Even the very symmetrical faces are still rather asymmetrical. So if you've got it on Hollywood Crush, go ahead and try and pick that out. Alright, so as I said, these points right here underneath the scoop of the rib cage here is going to be necessary, because from here we're going to connect to the pelvis to the rib cage. It's not going to be directly straight down, it's going to be somewhat angled, so you'll have like this, almost an A shape here. And like with the female, we're going to add this little scoop to make it seem more like a bucket, but the male torso is more like a pelvis rather, is more like a box than a bowl. And for women being bowl, it's a little more obvious. For childbirth, of course. And then we'll add his very small hip bones. Men don't have as pronounced hip bones, and they usually lead to what's sought after as the bodybuilder V, but we'll get into that when we go to drawing the torso specifics. And let's do the thigh. So starting at that point where the hip bone pops out, we'll make it flare out just a little bit. We're not going for too much muscle. And then it straightens out at about here. And let's just define the crotch area. Generally, if you wanted to, and if you wanted to be a little more crude, you could make this a little more defined to allude to some more obvious things, but we're not going to. Gotta try and keep this as clean as possible. And then the inner thigh starts at not necessarily at the center line, but just a little step inwards. And like the female, the inner thigh hugs the bottom part of the knee, and the outer thigh stops at about halfway. Let's do the same on the other leg. I apologize, I feel like my head might have been in the shot that whole time. It's not easy to sit upright when you're kneeling here. And the outer thigh for the right leg. Is that? Yeah, the right leg. You try to think about it and you completely forget. Alright. Now for the calf and the lower leg. As with the female, it stands out, the outer calf, quite a bit. Goes down to maybe about a third, and then it straightens out. Seems like it sags just a little bit. There we go, that looks a little better. Yeah. It's all guesswork, really. And then the inner calf is going to turn inward, just pretty much go straight, follow the line for a little bit, and then it flares out a little bit, and then it tucks back into the knee. So you get this kind of an S shape. That's a very recurring shape in the human figure, because you have an S shape on the outer leg, you have an S shape on the inner calf. It's quite a recurring shape. Now, it's not to say that it happens all over the place, but it's quite frequent. And if that's one of the things that you can remember, then you're well on your way to actually having some basic principles down. And that, hey, it's like he has a limp. Anyway. And there we go, that's pretty much it. How are we on time? 13 minutes, approximately. Let's use some of this extra time that we have, because went a little fast here. So let's cover some extra principles here. So, if you're drawing a male and a female side by side, there are a couple of things that will line up perfectly if you have your proportions right. For one thing, the male head is going to be larger than the female's head. So, with that in mind, he's going to be proportionately taller because of that, even if they are both 7 heads tall. Oh, excuse me. So, if you have your proportions right, the female's head, the top of it, excluding her hair, even if it's like, I don't know, like, if she's a bloody Super Saiyan, her scalp, the top of her skull, will line up with the eye line of the male. And if you notice, you know what, I actually have it right here. So we have our female right here. Her crotch area lines up at about a quarter to a third down the fourth head. With our male, it's about halfway. Now, because of her shorter stature, those two should line up perfectly. So, in proportion, the female legs will be about the same length as the male's. And there were some other things I wanted to talk about as well, and I've completely forgotten them. Which is a little pathetic, but hey, what do you know? I'm only human. So I think, even though this was a little bit of a clipped tutorial, this was like my second or maybe third take, and I just wanted to get it done and over with. Oh yeah, this is just your archetypal form, and this is just one way to draw it. This is how I kind of draw it. It's a little bit off, but I'm also, I also have a secondary reference sitting right off camera that I was using as a basis. But I added my own flair. I was using it more to just know, like, okay, this is where the wrist goes, this is where the knees land, this is where his pectorals lie, that sort of thing. I wasn't trying to copy the person's artwork in the slightest. And you know what? As I said, it's okay to use reference. As long as you're not directly taking that drawing, like literally copy directly to your sheet of paper, color it the same, everything, and then pawn it off as your own. That's where it's bad. But say you just like, okay, I like this pose. Let's use it. But you add your own character on top of it and you draw in your own style, that sort of thing. Anyway, I am rambling at this point, so I hope you found this somewhat useful. I'm well aware that I probably was moving a little briskly again, so if you need to, go ahead and go over any parts that I probably rushed a little bit. Thank you all for watching. God bless.